discount. One discount per household.
A recall for a popular electric vehicle, ABC's Mike Dubusky.
Nissan is recalling around 24,000 Leaf EVs, saying the car's battery could overheat and catch fire when fast charging. The automaker says it's working on a software update to fix the problem and that Leaf owners should avoid fast charging in the meantime.
Nissan says it hasn't found the exact cause, the recall affecting cars made for the 2019 and 2020 model years. A spacecraft is blasted off on a fact-finding mission that may save our planet eventually.
The European Space Agency's Hera spacecraft, about the size of a small car, has now begun its 2-year journey to a small asteroid known for little else besides the fact that it was used as a dress rehearsal to save the Earth. In 2022, NASA launched its own spacecraft called DART toward the same asteroid to see if it was possible to knock it off its course, if such a rock were headed towards us. All of it will be studied and looked at by Hera using the dozen or so science instruments on board. Sherry Preston, ABC News.
An American climber, along with her British climbing partner, have been rescued after spending 3 days stranded in the Himalayas. They got stuck at 19,000 feet when the rope lifting their food and climbing equipment snapped. They sent an SOS text, but Indian Air Force helicopters were unable to locate them. They're eventually found by a French rescue team. Chuck Severson, ABC News.
Oh, no. Stomach issues again?
Stomach issues?
Who are you?
Your pancreas. I could be the real reason for your diarrhea, gas, bloating, stomach pain, or loose oily stools.
I thought it was my stomach.
People often do, but any of these symptoms could mean having a condition called exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, or EPI. With EPI, the pancreas doesn't release enough enzymes to break down food, but EPI is manageable. Use the symptom checker on identifyepi.com and speak with your doctor. That's identifyepi.com. Sponsored by AbbVie.
News Talk 610 AM and 102.1 FM. KVNU.
I'm Bill Walter, KVNU News. News is brought to you by Logan Extermination. Utah has already turned I-15 into a vital corridor for electric vehicles, but it's now ready to take the next step to expand charging stations across rural routes in coordination with 7 other Intermountain West states. Utah Clean Cities announced that Charge West, a project aiming to add stretches of electric vehicle charging stations across rural highways across the Beehive State, as well as Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, New Mexico, and Wyoming, is now underway. The project received a $1.5 million contract from the Department of Energy's Vehicle Technologies Office program, allowing for more advanced planning. It's considered the biggest step since the 8 states signed a memorandum of understanding back in 2017, creating the backbone for the project. Tammy Bostic, director of Utah Clean Cities and lead of the Charge West project, said the plan aims to significantly reduce carbon emissions among heavily traveled routes while enhancing access to scenic byways and national parks. It will revolutionize electric transportation in the West. Electric vehicle use remains on the rise in Utah. There were nearly 40,000 electric vehicles registered in the state by the end of last year, up nearly 400% from 2020, according to state and federal data. Bostic believes that this shows that the market is driving the demand for a charging grid beyond urban hubs where it's easier to find charging stations. 2 stolen guns, drugs, and suspected stolen gift cards were recovered from a stolen car on Saturday. Salt Lake City police said they recovered the items during a stolen car investigation. The police department said they are committed to keeping the community safe and reducing violent crime by seizing illegal firearms and holding offenders accountable. A Utah nonprofit that aims to empower and uplift the LGBTQ plus community is bringing awareness to what they say is a persistent trend of pride flag theft and vandalism. On August 9th, 2 suspects were allegedly caught on surveillance video with removing pride flags from outside the Logan Pride Foundation building. Late last month, a 16-year-old was arrested and faces charges of theft and criminal mischief Police are attempting to identify the second suspect involved in the cutting down and theft of the flags. Those flags were sponsored by Project Rainbow Utah. The project says that in its annual budget, it plans for 15%, or about 900 flags, to be stolen. That estimate to more than doubled in 2023 during their campaign for Pride Month, where 1,044 flags were lost, mostly because of theft or vandalism. Over the past 4 years, Project Rainbow had on average more than 6,200 flag signups. Last year, the total cost for lost flags was $17,748. The total extra lost revenue due to increased thefts in 2023 was $8,874. KBNU Weather is brought to you by Matt Robbins with Quality First Insurance. He has access to many insurance carriers and will give you options to protect your business. Give your insurance package a fresh look. Quality First Insurance, 752-0101. Partly cloudy tonight, upper 40s overnight. Another nice day tomorrow, into the low 80s. Plenty of sunshine. Get more news at CashValleyDaily.com.
Even though the weather's grown colder, you still have time to have your fruit trees pruned. Logan Extermination says your trees need to be trimmed back in order to achieve success next year. And this is the first step to a bountiful harvest. However, you could do more bad than good if you don't know what you're doing. Save the headache and call Logan Extermination today and get a jump on tree pruning. Prices will vary depending on your needs. Logan Extermination, 752-8450.
The Above and Beyond Salute, sponsored by Firehouse Subs, recognizing first responders and other deserving individuals in our community. Friday mornings at 8:30 on News Talk KVNU. The Aggies return home to continue conference play Friday night in a huge homecoming matchup as they host the UNLV Rebels.
It's going to be a homecoming crowd, so hopefully, I know the herd will show up, but hopefully everyone else will still show up and continue to support this group because they sure deserve it.
Pre-game begins at 5, kickoff is at 7, and post-game an Aggie call immediately follows the game. It's the Aggies and the Rebels. Friday night on News Talk KVNU, the heritage home for the Aggies.
Welcome back to KVNU's For the People. Hour 2 of today's show. Sounding very, very Saturday Night Live does public broadcasting there. Not sure where that came from. Welcome back. Governor Cox started his monthly news conference last week with an update on wildfire season. Big question this year on when it would end and when wildfire season traditionally wrapped up in September. But in drought years, 21 and 22, it went all the way into November. There was even in southern Utah concern of wildfires in December of 2021. But this year, we're still setting records for daytime highs occasionally over the last month, but it does look like fall is setting in. There was a red flag warning for northern Utah just Friday due to winds. That big concern whenever the winds are expected to be powerful and sustained, that any small fire turns into a full-on wildfire. I saw, driving out of a canyon over the weekend, I saw some folks with a fire right off the side of the road, on the other side of the road from a big dry grass hillside. And I wish I had thought to roll my window down and say something about what I thought of their decision-making, but it didn't cross my mind. But as I was coming out of the canyon, I saw two sheriff's deputies headed up the canyon. So I'm assuming someone else maybe called that in. But, yeah, we've still got to be careful. Wildfire season is not over here in Utah, and there are currently 4 decent-sized fires burning in Utah. Near Dove Creek, one out in the Tooele area, and, not the Tooele area on the other side of the mountains from them, actually, but the western portion of Salt Lake is currently on fire. Small fire, and they have that contained. There's one burning near the Tri-Rivers area, in Duchesne River meets other rivers. That one is the largest fire burning in Utah right now, and then there's a smaller fire right on the Utah-Wyoming border near Elizabeth and Yellow Lake. So, again, this is to say that Dove Creek is small, about 600 acres. Yellow Lake, a little larger, about 15,000 acres. The one burning out west by the Ochre Mountains in the Tooele area, also small, about 281 acres. That was discovered on the 5th. Is a pretty decent wildfire season still afoot, with one of these fires started just in the last 24 hours. So some of the statistics around this: total fires in the 2024 wildfire season, which officially kicked off in May of this year, 1,197 fires. Total acres burned, according to Utah Fire Info, a service of the Utah Forester's Office. Total acres burned in 2024, 72,307. Of the 1,197 fires total, 670, way more than half, were human-caused. Only 453 were due to natural causes, lightning and things like that. So that means in the state of Utah, natural causes burned about 27,000 acres. Humans burned 30,000 acres in 2024. Pretty stark. Governor Cox made this a part of his monthly news conference last week. In fact, he started the conference with an update on wildfires and the same news that I'm imparting here. The wildfire season is slowing down, but not over.
There are a lot of things happening in our state right now. I'd like to focus on just a couple, and maybe first, I'd like to talk a little bit about wildfire season as we are coming to the end of wildfire season. It's been an interesting summer for us. We've had hot and very dry conditions across June and July and into August. I will say, just want to give some statistics. Nationwide, there have been over 37,000 wildfires across the country that have burned so far about 7.3 million acres, with some of them still burning hot. There are nationwide about 26,000 wildland firefighters and support personnel fighting these fires nationwide. Our neighboring states have experienced significant wildfires, and those have been covered, and we're providing support where we can. I received a text message from Governor Gavin Newsom just thanking Utah for the support that we have given to our friends in California who have had a really rough wildfire season. Now, Utah's fared better than our neighbors, and we've had about 1,100, well, to be more precise, 1,131 fires totaling about 57,000 acres. 434 of those were naturally caused, mostly lightning. 77 were from unknown causes, and 620 of these were caused by humans. Our firefighters, and I really just want to give a shout out to them, to everybody who's been engaged in this at the local level, state level, and federal level. They've done an incredible job at keeping us safe this year. This includes, again, those local fire departments, many of whom are volunteer fire departments, especially in rural Utah, that provide so much support to our state and federal agencies. 94% of Utah's wildfires have been caught before growing over 10 acres. And this is in part because of some changes that we've made over the past couple of years that we're very excited and proud of. I can just tell you definitively that if we had conditions like we had this year, 5 or 6 years ago, we would have had much larger fires, and likely hundreds of thousands of acres would have burned. But we invested in a couple helicopters. We have a helitack crew and new equipment that we have cached strategically in places in central Utah that have helped us to catch fires and effectively attack larger fires before they get out of control. So again, I want to thank Utahns for practicing their fire sense, doing your part. We know that human-caused fires historically been about 54% of all wildfires. This year, been about 54% over the past couple years, significantly lower than the national average of 80%. We're doing a much better job than we used to in not starting as many human-caused fires. But even though the weather's cooling down, wildfire risk is still high out there. And so we just want you to be safe and careful as you're out and about. We haven't had a chance to have this meeting since school came back into session. I just want to shout out our teachers as well, the incredible people who teach our children across the state. We have some of the best teachers in the world right here in Utah. To families and students who are all now back in school, we hope you're having a great school year, a safe school year, and that we continue to learn and progress as a state. We're just so proud of the education system that we're building here.
That was Governor Cox again opening his monthly news conference last week with an update. A thank you to teachers there at the end, but an update on fire restrictions, fire data, the current situation out there. Wildfire season not over here in Utah. 4 decent-sized fires burning right now. Fireworks at this point restricted throughout the state, but that's not really due to fire. That's state law. There are 3 times each year that you can legally set off fireworks, and we are outside of that window. As far as campfire restrictions, they've been rescinded in most areas, but here in northern Utah, there is still an overall campfire restriction in the West Desert. Basically, everything that is Bureau of Land Management land out there west of I-15, no campfires. Most of the areas around here, campfires are allowed, but again, use some common sense because there are wildfires burning in Utah right now. One in Utah, or the one in the Duchesne River area, was they anticipate, or they believe that was caused by a campfire in an improved fire pit. The winds caught it, gusted some embers out of that fire, and now there are several hundred firefighters out there putting their lives on the line, trying to put that out before it burns even closer to the areas that have already been evacuated. So, again, use some common sense. It's pretty dry out there. There is a lot of fuel, especially with the leaves coming down now as well. And those leaves are as dry as the tall grass is. So, common sense and little carefulness, and we can probably get to the end of wildfire season without burning northern Utah down. If you'd like to watch the governor's full news conference, I've linked to it on our Facebook page, courtesy of the Governor Spencer J. Cox Facebook page. That link is up now. It's about an hour long, a lot of updates there from the governor, but that was how he started things last week, an update on wildfire season, which is still fully in effect here in Utah from north to south. We'll be back with more of KVN News for the People right after this.
Hi, this is Chris Wilson at Wilson Motor Company. It's time for our fall clearance sales event. We have a great selection of over 130 new Fords and over 60 Nissans that need to go. All 24 models have closeout pricing. We have rebates up to $9,000 and rates as low as 0% for 72 months. Or we have over 125 pre-owned vehicles to choose from. Now is a great time to buy a new or pre-owned vehicle. Check out our inventory online at wilsonmotor.com. Hurry in, our fall clearance sales event ends soon.
Whether you're a farmer working the fields, a homeowner tackling weekend projects, or a contractor building the next big thing, you need a Kubota machine that works as hard as you do. And Cash Equipment is home to all your Kubota equipment, service, and parts needs. From plowing fields and clearing land to digging trenches and moving material. Come see why Cash Equipment and Kubota are the choice of champions on the farm, at home, and on the job site. Cash Equipment in Hyde Park and online at cashequipment.com.
Happy birthday, Bell Medical. For 8 years, we have had the privilege of helping people feel confident and love their bodies. To celebrate, we're offering a special on our Bell Sculpt 360 procedure for only $4,800. And for those looking to enhance their transformation, you can bundle it with a mini tuck for $9,500. Slim down, sculpt your body. Celebrate together. Schedule your free consultation today at bellmedical.com. That's BELLE medical.com.
The Above and Beyond Salute.
Good morning, this is Beverly.
Beverly Dunford, my name is Will Feelright. Years ago, you helped put together a carpool for many who are suffering from arthritis and other pains to be able to go to different hot springs in the area to get some pain relief.
I started that carpool back in 2011, and we still go.
Well, we've got a $40 gift card for you to Firehouse Subs as a way of just telling you thanks for what you did.
Oh, wow. Wow, thank you.
The Above and Beyond Salute on News Talk KVNU.
Welcome back to KVNU's For the People. After his remarks, which you just heard a clip of there on wildfires, some of the data, and the fact that wildfire season isn't over yet here in Utah, especially in northern Utah out in the West Desert, where campfires are still restricted. Everybody, be careful. You got to think this through so that you're not burning down the state or our neck of the woods, at least. So the governor took questions from the media after his remarks, and one of the questions came out of the blue, but it is an interesting issue that's bubbled up in two different interim sessions now. Requires some backstory, quick backstory. So in the caucus system, the party gets to decide on a couple of things, and in a presidential year, that is a decision as to whether. Now, this is any party, but in this case specifically, we're talking about the Utah GOP. But they decided, party leadership decided, instead of running a presidential primary this year, as the Democrats did, they would do a caucus vote. So they would just do it's called a presidential preference poll. So delegates attending caucus or a caucus night, in addition to, the regular caucus night elections that are going on, electing delegates and precinct leaders and things like that, they also got to cast a vote in this presidential preference poll. No surprise, Donald Trump won the poll, although Nikki Haley came in a really close second. What was a surprise is that days later, after the numbers have been crunched, the party had to confess that the turnout in that presidential preference poll was 9%, which is embarrassing. 9% of those who could vote, which is basically any registered Republican that showed up at caucus night, 9% voted. We don't even see turnout that low in municipal elections years here in Cache Valley. So, understandably, the party has been scrambling since. What did they do wrong? There are also reports of Americans with Disabilities Act violations, which could actually result in some hefty fines for the party. One caucus goer in a wheelchair said there was no ramp at their caucus location, and they were not actually allowed access to the elevator in the room to get up to where the voting was happening because no one had a key, which is the. So Chair Robert Axon and members of the Central Committee really taking some heat from their own party members on this, including the legislature. But what's been happening in the legislature has been equally as interesting because it appears to be a little bit of a battle of wills between those Republican lawmakers who want to sit down and talk about this and make it a legislative issue. Are they going to write some statute saying to a party, if you have to consider these things like ADA violations, what you're doing for turnout, and then you have another group of lawmakers. I don't know how many is in each camp, but I know so far they've been able to keep this at a stalemate. It's not moved in any direction. So you've got one camp that wants to talk about it and address it legislatively and bring it up in committee meetings during interim sessions each month since the caucus has happened in April. You've got another camp that wants it to just be buried and go away. Let's pretend it didn't happen. The party can fix it internally. And that back and forth has continued every interim session each month since April. It's been on an agenda for a committee, and people have been prepared to talk about it, including public there to provide public testimony. And then committee chairs have killed it, have swiped it from the agenda last minute, and making other lawmakers mad. And they're saying mean things about each other to the media over it. Governor Cox, after his remarks on wildfires, was asked about that. Where's the governor at on this? Does he think the legislature needs to get involved in what happened on caucus night in the Utah GOP and that abysmal 9% turnout? Here's what Governor Cox had to say.
Yeah, so I've said before, I was disappointed by the turnout, that 9.3%. I would love to see that turnout much higher. I think that the caucus convention system works and works well when we have significant turnout. When we don't, it doesn't. It's not representative, and I think that's one of the issues. So there were a couple questions there. The question, yes, the state, and this is very clear. The legal precedent from this goes back to the founding. It's very clear that the state, the legislature, does have the ability to decide how people get on a ballot. That is very clear. There's really no controversy about that. States don't have to recognize parties to get people on the ballot. There's lots of states do it lots of different ways. Alaska does it very differently than California. California does it very differently than Utah. Utah does it very differently than Georgia, and that is up to our representative form of government to decide how that's going to work. So yes, the legislature could come in. They have made changes in the past. SB 54 was one of those changes that changed the way that people get on the ballot. Certainly, there are other laws that relate to, and federal laws included, that relate to ADA compliance. I'm not sure what the argument is there. I'm not weighing in, but the law is the law. When it comes to the way parties handle their inner workings, though, that is protected under the Constitution. And so parties have a right to decide their membership, decide what they want their parties to be, decide how they hold their meetings and when they hold their meetings and those types of things. And so it wouldn't be appropriate for the state to weigh in and compel a party to do something unless the party was somehow violating a law.
Recently, I've
So
reported
that was the governor's response, basically saying he sides with the lawmakers who want to stop this from coming up during interim committee meetings. And I tend to agree with him on this, although, as a political junkie, it would be really interesting if this came up for committee debate during an interim meeting, or better yet, during the general session, because that would require party leadership to show up and explain themselves, which Chair Axon and others have not bothered to do on this. So I think it would be really interesting and maybe even have some public value. It would definitely have a news value, but for the fireworks. But I think it could have some public value as well. What the governor is right. The party can do, to a certain extent, the legislature gets to write election law and ballot law and how qualified, recognized political parties put people on the ballot. That's been made clear by several lawsuits in the last decade, but it was also clear before those lawsuits, which is why everyone begged the chair, James Evans, at the time to not sue, because they knew he'd lose, because it's kind of written into the state's founding documents. So the legislature can decide those things, but the governor is right. When it comes to meetings, when it comes to whether or not to have a primary or a presidential preference poll, those decisions are completely up to the party, and the legislature has no business getting in the middle of it, even though they are, the majority at least, members of the same party. I don't understand the utility of the legislature getting involved, especially considering the mess the legislature has made recently over Amendment D. their water policy that is blown up in their face. The legislature, I think, needs to be worried about its own house, and literally in this case, I mean the House. The Senate seems to have its act together a little bit more, but I'm not sure what kind of a circus Speaker Mike Schultz is running there. And Brad Wilson wasn't exactly knocking it out of the park before him, at least in contrast with his predecessors as Speaker. So I think the legislature has bigger concerns than getting in the middle of the Utah Republican Party's business. I get it. You know, ADA violations are serious. The state could end up sued in that scenario. The party definitely could end up fined a lot of money, donors' money, that is going to go to someone just not thinking about Americans with Disability Act required accessibility. But again, one story, I mean, this is just pure negligence on the part of party leadership, in my opinion. But one story that a person told the Deseret News, she came to caucus night. She's in a wheelchair. She'd been to multiple caucus nights over the last couple of decades, an older woman. But she said she got there. No one had a key to the elevator, so she couldn't go upstairs to vote in the presidential preference poll. She went home. She was denied her right to her voice. And she said she's a lifelong registered Republican. She was mad, too, if you see that video. That's just someone in party leadership being negligent. So maybe it's a leadership issue more than anything else. Maybe we need new leadership in the party. But either way, it's embarrassing when you see 9% turnout. The justification given is it saved taxpayers a lot of money by Utah Republicans holding a presidential preference poll, which they can do internally and not involve the state, and running a primary election, which requires county clerk's offices to be involved. They're right. It saved taxpayers a lot of money, but 9% turnout. On the other hand, everyone knew how Utah was going to vote. I think what the party was trying to do was avoid the primary numbers that we saw in 2020 and 16, in which a certain candidate won the state, but not by a lot, compared especially to other Republican presidential candidates. So I see what the party was trying to do, but they could have had a presidential preference poll. They could have gotten word out more effectively, given incentive for delegates and registered voters to show up and vote. 9% turnout is embarrassing. No party should be proud of that. But again, I agree with the governor as far as the legislature getting involved. The legislature needs to take care of its own problems first before it starts telling any of the major parties how best to do business. Again, state constitution gives them authority to write election law, to define how people get on the ballot here in Utah, and to even decide which parties are recognized here in Utah. That's a constitutional right of the legislature. But when it comes to the party's private business on how to conduct meetings, whether or not to do a primary or presidential election poll when they choose their nominees internally, let the party sort this out. It was a mess for the party. 9% turnout is an absolute embarrassment for the Utah GOP and its current leadership. I don't think the legislature getting involved is going to help them fix whatever's wrong. We'll be back after this look at the news with KVNU's Bill Walter.
Thank you, Jason. KVNU News is brought to you by Canyon Landscaping. President Russell M. Nelson of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints announced 17 new temples during the concluding session of the October 2024 General Conference. Nelson, who recently turned 100, named the new temple locations in the Sunday afternoon session of the 194th Semi-Annual Conference. The new temples include one in Mexico, Santa Ana, El Salvador, Medellin, Colombia, Santiago, Dominican Republic, a new one in Chile, Dublin, Ireland, Milan, Italy, new one in Nigeria, also Kampala, Uganda, one in Mozambique, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, Queen Creek, Arizona, El Paso, Texas, Huntsville, Alabama, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Summit, New Jersey, and Price, Utah. According to a press release, the temple in the city of Price will be the 31st temple in Utah, either in operation, under renovation, under construction, or announced. Church officials said the Coeur d'Alene, Idaho temple will be the state's 10th temple. One person was arrested following a shooting that left a man dead outside a Maverick in Salt Lake City Saturday afternoon. 49-year-old Hashad Hassan Pori is being charged with murder. Salt Lake City police responded to reports of a shooting near 200 South State Street at about 12:18 p.m. Upon arrival, they found a 30-year-old man on the ground in the parking lot behind Maverick, suffering from at least one gunshot wound. Despite immediate life-saving efforts by officers, firefighters, and witnesses, including an ER nurse, the man died on the scene. Investigators believe an argument occurred between the victim and Hassan Pori before the shooting. Authorities stated the incident appears to have been isolated, and Hassan Pori was apprehended safely near 200 South, 300 East in Salt Lake. Police are currently collaborating with the medical examiner's office to determine the victim's identity, exact age, and cause of death, as well as to notify his family. KBNU weather brought to you by Mount Logan Laundry, with 55 and 80-pound washers to make your stay much shorter in Logan and Brigham City. Partly cloudy tonight is the forecast. Overnight low in the upper 40s, and then sunny into the low 80s on Tuesday and Wednesday. Get more news at CashValleyDaily.com.
ABC News, I'm Chuck Sievertson. There are hurricane and storm surge warnings for portions of Florida's west coast. A major hurricane, Milton, forecast to smash ashore late Wednesday or early Thursday. ABC News meteorologist Ginger Z.
10 to 15 feet of surge around here. That is more than doubling what we saw just 2 weeks ago, which was a record. You could have homes wash away, cars wash away in that type of surge.
The head of the U.S. Disaster Response Agency pushing back against false claims repeated by former President Trump that some FEMA money is going to illegal migrants. Update that missile attack of about 190 rockets fired at Israel on the one-year anniversary of the Hamas invasion. Most of the missiles came from Hezbollah militants in Lebanon, some from Hamas in Gaza. The selling of the first rapid home flu and COVID combo tests without a prescription has been okayed by the Food and Drug Administration. Gasoline prices went down some more the past week, says the Energy Department. This is ABC News.
Fall is the perfect time to landscape, and Canyon Landscaping is ready to build or transform your outdoor space. They bring your vision to life with expert care, including installing beautiful planting beds and crafting custom paver patios. They handle your entire project from start to finish, and they have the team to get the design just right. But hurry, spots are filling up fast. Visit canyonlandscaping.com or call 752-3838 today. Let's make your outdoor space a true extension of your home. Call Canyon Landscaping. Look for the leaf.
The Above and Beyond Salute, sponsored by Firehouse Subs, recognizing first responders and other deserving individuals in our community. Friday mornings at 8:30 on News Talk KVNU.
Saturday, October 12th, the Cache Valley Media Group has teamed up with Cache Valley Hearing and Audiology to bring you the 2024 USU Homecoming Parade. Come down to Main Street or watch the live stream on CacheValleyDaily.com. The parade kicks off at 10 a.m. sharp. Thanks to our sponsor, Cache Valley Hearing and Audiology, helping you hear every moment loud and clear. Don't miss the 2024 USU Homecoming Parade, October 12th at 10 a.m. Be there or watch it live on CacheValleyDaily.com.
Hi, this is Gordon Deal. Tuesday on This Morning, America's First News. Florida prepares for the arrival in the Tampa area of Hurricane Milton. Meanwhile, there's still relief efforts underway from Hurricane Helene. Also, it's almost like the Bidens are gone already. Hear how few public appearances the president has made since quitting the race, and why talking about money can feel worse than talking about politics. Tuesday on This Morning, America's First News. From 4 to 6 on News Talk KVNU, 610 AM and 102 FM. Your station for news and talk.
Welcome back to KVNU's For the People. Hurricanes. Florida about to receive, as the Tampa Bay Times called it this morning, a 1-2 punch after parts of Florida were hit pretty hard. 6 states hit very hard, actually, by Hurricane Helene. Florida is getting a second go-round courtesy of Hurricane Milton. Evacuations are underway, and the Tampa Bay area could receive, again, they're calling it a 1-2 punch. National Weather Service Tampa Bay reported today that if Hurricane Milton stays on its current track, it'll be the worst storm to impact the region in Florida it's headed for in 100 years. Today it ramped up to a Category 5, which is total devastation on land. Now it'll wind down from that a little bit before it hits, before it makes landfall, but it's still expected to be one of the worst storms in quite some time. So fingers crossed that everyone is out and that the damage isn't as bad as it could be. This is to set the stage for what we're going to talk about here, because we got a great question from a listener after we were talking about Hurricane Helene last week. Listener wanted to know if there had ever been a hurricane on the West Coast, and also if and when, and also if Utah's weather is also affected by these hurricanes, even though they're that far away. When a storm comes through that's that powerful, 100+ mile an hour winds, how does it affect Utah's weather? Well, I didn't know the answer to any of those questions, so I actually reached out to some experts to get some information. But to set it up, here's just a bit of the coverage from ABC News as they ramp up for Hurricane Milton to kind of drive home what a big deal this is.
Let's bring in David Connor. He's the lead public information officer with Pinellas County in the Tampa Bay area. David, how are you and your teams preparing right now?
Well, in Pinellas County, we've already ordered evacuations in zones A, B, and C for our most vulnerable residents. Those are the folks living in nursing homes, staying in hospitals, assisted living facilities, folks with special medical needs, to try to give them as much time as possible to get to safety. We're encouraging everyone else living in those zones to evacuate if they have the opportunity to do so, and our leadership team is meeting to discuss and finalize formal evacuation orders.
I know storm surge is the biggest threat in these storms. What about for those who live in these areas above the storm surge threat, looking at these wind speeds?
You know, oftentimes when people think about evacuating, they think about getting away from that dangerous storm surge. But something we also want folks to consider is what the post-storm landscape might look like. And even if your house is relatively undamaged, the longer-term power outages, potentially water outages, sewer outages, lack of access to stores, infrastructure, food supplies, et cetera. And it's a lot to consider, and we do hope that everybody takes this storm seriously.
So that's just, again, a little bit of the ABC News coverage on this, and I bring you that just to kind of set the stage for what we're going to talk about here, because I learned something kind of frightening today. We don't, you might know this, we don't deal with a lot of hurricanes on the West Coast. So to the listener's first question, listener said, does a hurricane in Florida impact Utah's weather? It can. It has. Not significantly, not to this extent, not to the evacuation and devastation of entire towns extent, like what will happen in Florida oftentimes during hurricanes. But it does impact our weather because it can throw a lot of moisture our way. What I found, though, is speaking with scientists up there on campus at the OSU Climate Center, is that a hurricane in Florida is most likely to affect Utah's weather by shifting airstreams and wind patterns. And so it can lead to higher winds than is seasonal for a couple of hours, for a day. It can bump a storm out or in. So a storm that maybe wasn't going to come our way does, because a hurricane comes across the Gulf and up onto land, and it's creates just enough of a pressure bubble that it can shift the positioning of storms. But what a hurricane on the East Coast can't do to Utah is make a storm that does hit Utah worse. It'll still be a typical storm to hit Utah, but a hurricane could push it towards us when it otherwise may have gone past. Hope that makes sense. So basically, yes, strong winds of a hurricane can impact airflow in so many ways that any state in the country can be affected by one, even if it hits the Gulf Coast. But it's usually an impact that is not noticeable or negligible, because you see the storm come over. You have no way to know if that storm was going to hit or not, and the storm's not any worse than storms in Utah always are. So, but if you really dig into it, you might be able to see the patterns and the airflow and say, oh, that one would have missed us. It would have just hit Denver. but that big hurricane in Florida pushed just enough of everything over that it shifted and hit Salt Lake and Cache Valley instead. So that's the long answer to that question. Does a hurricane in Florida impact weather in Utah? Yes, but not in any noticeable way, really. Or yes, it can, and it's rare, but not in any noticeable way. So second question is from this listener is, why are there not hurricanes on the California coast, on the West Coast? And this one I actually did know the answer to, but I learned something scary from the researchers in USU's Climate Center, and you can actually see this for yourself on a link I've posted on our Facebook page where some of this research has been made public. The answer to that is, I remember this from a science class, and I don't know why this sticks in my head, but the short answer to why there aren't hurricanes along the California and Oregon coast is, well, kind of there are, but they don't make it, if that makes any sense. So the conditions that are required for a hurricane have a lot to do with ocean temperatures. And what happens is hurricane-like storm behavior so when they see these hurricanes coming on the East Coast, what they're actually denoting is something that happens hundreds of miles out at sea, sometimes thousands, and they can see these things forming, and then they just kind of keep watching them. And if they grow to a certain point and get close enough and are headed directly towards land, then they say, okay, hurricane. Because there are hurricanes out at sea a lot too, but you don't hear about those because they don't blow anybody's house down or hurt or kill anyone. So a hurricane starts to form, and that attracts the attention of oceanographers and atmospheric administration researchers. And, this is all part of our overall weather monitoring system globally, which includes the NOAA and National Weather Service and, a lot of folks involved. But hurricane behavior does occur off the West Coast. Actually, let me put it this way. The seed of a hurricane occurs off of the West Coast, just as it does off of the East Coast. What stops it from not ever, but very, very rarely actually becoming a hurricane that makes landfall on the West Coast is a combination of airstreams, jet streams, and ocean temperatures. So basically, the short answer is California and Oregon and Washington don't get hurricanes because the ocean is too cold in between them and where the seed of the hurricane forms. Because hurricanes do start forming, or at least the things that become hurricanes do start forming out in the ocean in between Hawaii and Mexico, where there's a warmer current. But there's this colder current along the east or along the West Coast so as that seed of a hurricane starts to grow and grow and grow, and maybe it's even moving towards San Diego, is that cooler temperature ocean, and all of the energy that creates a hurricane is sapped out of it, and it becomes, at worst, a tropical storm. Even those are rare, though. It's usually just a storm, sometimes pretty severe. Sometimes they last long enough to cause major flooding and damage in California and in Oregon, but never a hurricane. But, well, not never, because there was one. It was a hurricane that actually had enough power, enough energy to overcome, to a large extent, the colder ocean temperatures that it has to cross over in order to make landfall in California. But that colder ocean temperature did sap enough energy from it. By the time it was alerted as a hurricane, because it was a hurricane, there were evacuations, all kinds of stuff. This is in 1939. And the systems for monitoring hurricanes didn't really exist as well then. This was done with telescopes and weather balloons. And so they said, the storm's coming, it's pretty bad. It looks every bit like the hurricanes that hit Florida. There were evacuations and more. It hit the colder temperatures of the stream currents running along the coast of California, starting about 100 miles out, and it sapped all the energy out of it. By the time it actually hit the coast, it was just a really nasty tropical storm. and it did make landfall. That was in 1939. But it was a hurricane up to a couple of hours before it made landfall. That's the closest the California coast has ever gotten. Here's where the scary part comes in, though. The National Hurricane Center said that just a little bit ago issued a tropical storm watch for Southern California for the first time ever. And this was when in 2023 was Hurricane, I forget the name now, Hillary was coming in. So Hurricane Hillary was tracking toward Southern California, and it was expected to weaken and before making landfall, and the ocean surface temps were cold enough to do their job, to sap all the energy out of it. It was just going to be a tropical storm. But what the National Hurricane Center noticed is this didn't happen like it's supposed to, and the tropical storm ended up being way worse than anyone currently alive had seen, and that it ever existed since the data's been tracked. Since that's 1895, by the way, how far their data goes back there in California. And, well, long story short, warming ocean temperatures have scientists concerned about West Coast hurricanes. Now, a West Coast hurricane could very much impact Utah's weather. In fact, a West Coast hurricane with enough energy could clip southern Utah. It'd be a absolute anomaly of perfect conditions required for that to happen, according to the folks I talked to at the Utah Climate Center. But with warming ocean temperatures, the barrier that stops hurricanes from hitting the West Coast goes away, and you're reliant entirely at that point on the other thing that keeps them away, which is a jet stream, the winds that generally blow them back out to sea. But you lose one of those, and you could start to see them hit the West Coast. That's an actual reality. How soon might this happen? Well, on current trajectories, if we don't get or slow the warming of ocean temperatures over the next 25 to 30 years, hurricanes in California could actually start to be a thing. Scientists say not to the extent of the East Coast, but it could easily become at least an annual thing in California. And one big enough could make its way inland enough to clip southern Utah. Again, would require astronomical combination of conditions to do so, but it would be possible. So that was pleasant to hear. Check it out. I've posted a link to a lot of the things they sent along to me when I inquired about this, and appreciate Andrea for sending this question in. We'll be back with more of KVN News for the People right after this.
News Talk 610 AM 102.1 FM KVN.
Wolf, Sub-Zero, Thermador, and more. Your favorite luxury brands are right here in Cache Valley. This is Jay with Daryl's Appliance. We sell, service, install, and offer warranties on all our products. You will get the best pricing at Daryl's, including exclusive builder pricing for new builds and remodels. Don't forget instant rebates that save you thousands. Call, text, or drive out for a free consultation with one of our appliance experts. Top-of-the-line appliances deserve top-of-the-line service only at Daryl's Appliance West on Airport Road.
Have you experienced an increase in your insurance premiums? We know it can be both frustrating and confusing. This is Matt Robbins with Quality First Insurance, an Alera Group company. Insurance rates will always be increasing. As an auto owner's independent agency, we strive to stabilize the rate increases by quoting multiple carriers to give you multiple options. Give us a call today to discuss your rates and get the best price. 435-752-0101.
Did you know a block dryer vent is a real fire hazard? According to the Consumer Product Safety Commission, there are tens of thousands of dryer exhaust duct fires annually, leading to many injuries and death. You should have your dryer hose and the area around it cleaned once a year and inspect the vent and hose for any blockages at least every 6 months. Don't wait for disaster to strike because your dryer vent is blocked. Give John Henson a call at the Duct Hunter. Call 770-4813 today.
Breathe better, save money, protect your home. We are the Duct Hunter.
The Aggies Aggies return home to continue conference play Friday night in a huge homecoming matchup as they host the UNLV Rebels.
It's going to be a homecoming crowd, so hopefully, I know the herd will show up, but hopefully everyone else will still show up and continue to support this group because they sure deserve it.
Pre-game begins at 5, kickoff is at 7, and post-game an Aggie call immediately follows the game. It's the Aggies and the Rebels. Friday night on News Talk KVNU, the heritage home for the Aggies.
I hope you all will forgive me, but I'm about to violate my promise to listeners to try my best to wrap the show up on a positive note every day, because this story is not positive. It's actually creepy, but it's so interesting I have to do it. Did you know there is a gigantic spider festival in Colorado happening right now, and you can go to it? The Colorado town out there on the plains of Colorado of La Junta, every year at this time has a spider festival, and apparently it's a huge part of the local economy. Associated Press actually has some audio of interviews they did with spider lovers and scientists hanging out in this Colorado town all last week, this week, and the next. It's 3 weeks long. Why? Well, it's tarantula mating season. This is when the male spiders scurry out of their burrows in search of a mate, and they're all out in the open where you can see them. Apparently, large predatory birds love this too, because who doesn't love to snack on a giant fuzzy spider? But this is actually a big deal for scientists. It's one of the few times they can actually study this spider, because most of the time they are very difficult to study outside of a lab environment. But this is also creepy. The town of La Junta is actually overrun by the spiders. So much so that residents try to limit their driving out of respect for the spiders, who have this 3-week period when the temperatures are right for mating. Ew. But hats off to the residents of La Junta for their spider respect, and congrats to the spider lovers and scientists, I guess. They call it the Tarantula Festival. It happens late September, early October every year. And like I say, apparently it's a pretty big part of La Junta, Colorado's economy. Fills the hotels and packs the restaurants, and a lot of business owners rely on it. And you can get a T-shirt saying you were at Spiderfest, La Junta, Colorado. Oof. Not me. Check it out, though, if you're interested. I've linked to the Associated Press story on our Facebook page, and that's our show for today. Thank you for tuning in. Stick around. Dave Ramsey is next here on KVNU Logan.
News and talk around the clock.
I listen to you all the time.
News Talk KVNU Logan, 610 a.m. at 1.